I've become quite skeptical of the unwritten rule that just because a boy and girl appear in the same feature, a romance must ensue. Rather, I want to portray a slightly different relationship, one where the two mutually inspire each other to live. If I'm able to, then perhaps I'll be closer to portraying a true expression of love. Hayao Miyazaki. Yay, another video about Platonic love and Ghibli. Didn't we already have that, you might think? But to this, I want to say, first off, there's no such thing as too much Ghibli. And secondly, this is not a video about Ghibli and Platonic love, but Ghibli and love according to Plato. There's quite some difference. I wrote my whole master thesis based on this quote of Hayao Miyazaki. And doing the research of the term Platonic love, I came across so many new discoveries I hadn't heard in any video up until now. So I thought it must be worth sharing all this information with other people. In the first part of my work, I've dived into the work Symposium, where the term originates from. And in the second part, I've analyzed Hayao Miyazaki's Howl's Moving Castle and Isao Takahata's The Tale of the Princess Kaguya with the term in mind. I looked into Isao Takahata's work as well to make the point that this theory of Platonic love applies to all works of Ghibli. So yeah, let's directly jump into the term Platonic love. As the term suggests, Platonic love comes from the Greek philosopher Plato and originates from his work, which was approximately written in 5th century BC, the Symposium. Symposium by definition means gathering, a coming together of a group of people where something is celebrated or discussed. In this case, a bunch of Athenian men come together to celebrate the success of a poet named Agathon. And somehow the conversation turns out to be a discussion on eros and love. This format is very usual for Plato. In most of his works, he reveals his philosophy through dialogue. One of the most important things here is that the dialogue also has Socrates in it, so in the end, everything comes together in his wisdom. But before that, 5 other men of the Athenian elite give their opinion on eros and love. The first speaker being Phaedrus, who believes that eros is the eldest of the gods. Eros here is the first existence, thus the origin of everything good and beautiful. In this sense, he says, "For what is to guide people who want to live beautifully throughout their lives can be achieved neither by wealth nor by anything else as beautifully as by love." So everything good only can be achieved through the power of love. And according to Phaedrus, this not only applies on a personal level, but also on a communal, societal level. Because for the shame of a lover before they're beloved, that person becomes the best version of themselves. For this, Phaedrus names a few examples like Achilles, who has become a war hero driven by his love. Next we have Pausanias, who differentiates between heavenly and vulgar love. According to him, vulgar love is obviously the bodily attraction, the superficial love, and heavenly love is the spiritual and intellectual love. And funny enough, for Pausanias, there's only one way of experiencing true love, and this is between an elderly wise man and his younger male lover, because only men are capable to achieve the good with their love for one another. Everything else is just vulgar love. This is the written text, and many of the research papers on this book suggest that Pausanias just wanted to flex his influence on the occasion of the day because he himself was Agathon's lover. He just wanted to say that Agathon's success is because of him. The same principle that personal interests are applied in the definition of love can also be seen in the next speaker, Eryximakos, a practicing physician who defines love through everything in the universe. For him, the universe exists within these paradoxes, contrasts, and love, eros, is the balance between all of these contrasts, creating harmony on the universe. Here, Eros' role as an all-encompassing god is one of his most important characteristics. And before we move on, I want to put a pin on Eryximakos' understanding of love because we're coming back to it, analyzing the tale of Princess Kaguya. Next, we have the comedy writer Aristophanes, who likewise defines love through something he knows best, a myth. You might be familiar with this image. This is Leonardo da Vinci's interpretation of the round man from this myth. Mankind first was created in this round form with 4 arms, 4 legs, 2 genitals each, and there were 3 genders: fully female human beings, fully males, and a third gender, the androgynous version with 2 different genitals. Zeus was so afraid of this powerful form of mankind that he separated us into 2 halves, and thus we became what we are now. And love is the search for your other half. You can never feel fulfilled until you find your other half. And this is also how sexual orientation is explained. If your other half was also from the same sex, you feel drawn to the same sex. But if you were separated as this androgynous form, you feel attracted to the opposite sex. And now, before Socrates enters the chat, we have Agathon, the host himself, who contradicts the belief that Eros is the eldest god. For him, he is the youngest. Eros, love, is the most vibrant, dynamic, and beautiful form amongst all the other gods. These are obviously very superficial summaries of what these men said. We are going a bit more into detail when it comes to Socrates. Interesting enough, while Pausanias said that true love can only happen between 2 men because women are not capable to experience the highest form of spirituality and intellectuality, Socrates turns this around. He doesn't talk about what he thinks love is. Socrates recites a prophetess named Diotima and her wisdoms. So the wisdom doesn't reveal itself through Socrates, but in this case, through this woman. Diotima has a completely different approach to love. For her, love is neither a god nor a human being. It's the child of Horos and Penia, wealth and power. This ancestry gives love the characteristic always striving, never fulfilled. What he gains slips away again, so that Eros neither ever suffers want nor is rich, and also stands in the middle between knowledge and ignorance. This is very important because it's only through this intermediate state that true knowledge can be attained. For neither the ignorant longs for something he is unaware of, nor the knowledgeable strives for something he already possesses. Here the pursuit of wisdom is characterized as a virtue because knowledge contains beauty and beauty contains bliss. And this eternal state of happiness is the goal per se. It doesn't need any other reason. Diotima's definition of love comes together in the ladder of love, the Scala Amoris, beginning with the bodily attraction, finding its final form in true beauty. This ascent begins with appreciation of one single body, and from there on, this person gets appreciation for all bodies, moving next to the appreciation of the soul, moving from the beauty of the soul to the beauty of knowledge, laws, and finally to beauty itself. This final form of beauty is eternal, unchanging, and not bound to a particular thing. Socrates, convinced by Diotima, shares her definition of beauty. Love drives human action and the pursuit of goodness, and strives for immortality through creation and the encounter with the supreme beauty. Diotima's insights make love a fundamental force, leading us to the philosophical life and the highest form of existence. Thus, love is merely a desire for physical beauty, but a profound force that leads to an eternal possession of goodness and the pursuit of ultimate happiness and wisdom. At this point, I asked myself, how can it be that we have a completely different understanding of Platonic love today? Because as you can see, bodily desire is not disregarded within Plato's work. It's not the final form, but it's a binding step, an important step that leads to the final ultimate form of beauty. To understand this, I've looked into the history of the Symposium's interpretations. This change started with the interpretations during the era of Neoplatonism in the 1st century AC. Here, philosophers like Plato started to focus only on the final form of love and interpreted it as a cosmic form of love, a very highly spiritual form. This also continued in the medieval interpretations of this work. Here we have thinkers like Dionysius, Johannes Scotus Rogena, and Thomas von Aquin, who interpreted the Scala Amoris as the ascent to God. These philosophers from the church took this concept and adapted it into their context. But the complete shift to today's understanding of Platonic love happened with the translation of the Italian philosopher Marsilio Ficino. According to his taste, he left out any sexual content of the Symposium, which, as we've seen, has quite some in it. These translations and interpretations didn't only come into play because of the focus on the religious aspect. Leaving out the sexual part, which also included at many parts homosexuality, just didn't fit into the narrative of the church. And this is how we ended up with this very pure and desexualized understanding of this term. Especially looking at Howl's Moving Castle, it just made so much sense to use Plato's definition of the term, rather platonic love as we understand it today, because that was my first confusion, to be honest. I wanted to analyze how Sophie and Howl inspired each other despite their romance, but the romance plot was still there. And when you look up any list online about platonic love, you see only friendships. So the confusion was there, but within Plato's definition of love, romance also has its place in this inspiring, thriving force. So I just continued with that, and let's do this. Let's see how Miyazaki works with this concept of love. Hayao Miyazaki's Howl's Moving Castle is an anime from the year 2004 and is based on the novel with the same name by Diana Wyans-Jones. The film is set in a fictional kingdom where magic is recognized as a skill and tells the story of Sophie, a young woman with very low self-esteem who works as a hat maker. One day, unexpectedly, the so-called Witch of the Waste curses her and transforms her into an old lady. Accepting her fate as it is, Sophie leaves her home and finds refuge in the moving castle of the notorious wizard Howl, where she pretends to be a cleaning lady. These two are also accompanied by the fire demon Calcifer, who brings the castle to life, Howl's apprentice Markel, and a living scarecrow. During their stay together, Sophie discovers that Howl also has some fears that is bound to a curse, but above all, he suffers from the control of the royal government, which forces him to participate in an everlasting war. The following analysis is going to focus on love as this transforming force that leads to this happy ending, and how Miyazaki portrays love within his stylistic and thematic dichotomy. By dichotomy, I mean that he uses conventional ways of filmmaking, storytelling, but only to challenge the status quo. Take Howl and Sophie's first encounter as an example. Miyazaki relies in this sequence heavily on traditional storytelling methods. It's not only thematically fitting the damsel in distress trope, where our male hero rescues our female protagonist, it also captures the tradition through the visual narrative. At first, the camera is positioned above Sophie, taking the POV of the soldiers who harass her and look down on her. Then Howl enters only partly the frame because he too is above Sophie and on the same wavelength as the soldiers. However, later on, at many points in the story, we see how this trope is reversed when Sophie is the one rescuing the day. Here, the surface and the subtext of the story are in a constant tension, which allows Miyazaki to create a marketable product that's still functioning as a subversion of the stereotypical portrayals of love from mass media. Accordingly, we have a heteronormative couple and follow a conventional storyline. Everything leads us to the happy ending in which Howl and Sophie end up as a couple and are freed from all conflicts. This reunion is illustrated by their kiss on the balcony of the now flying castle in the style of a classic Hollywood romance. But the convention of the ending is not based solely on the union of two lovers. Even the omnipresent state of war suddenly ends. So this is the thing we have to focus on. How does Miyazaki tell a very traditional story yet breaks through all the stereotypes of conventional movies? Here Diotima's conception of love comes into play. As Socrates recounts the teachings of the prophetess, Eros is not a god. He's not goodness itself, but the thriving force to good. So love itself is not the end goal. Eros rather is a demon caught between good and evil. He's neither divine nor mortal, but a mediator. Likewise, this is reflected in the multidimensional characters of this movie. None of them are neither good nor fully evil. Rather, all of these characters act upon inner struggles and try to turn away from their weaknesses towards the good. In this sense, love in Howl's Moving Castle is transformation through the awareness of one's own shortcomings as a requirement for development. The physical attraction between Howl and Sophie is also consistent with this understanding of love, where it's not something that comes between this spiritual growth, but is a step on the path leading to the ultimate goal. This attraction is primarily addressed in the movie through Howl and Sophie's contrasted attitudes towards beauty. For Howl, outward appearance is the essence of his existence. Even before his character is introduced, the women of the town talk about Howl as a very handsome magician who uses his looks to seduce women and eat their hearts. In this sense, after his failed hair-dyeing attempt, he says, "What's the point of living if you're not beautiful?" While Howl sees his destiny in external beauty, Sophie completely rejects her own appearance. When her sister asks her about a possible encounter with Howl, she says, "Don't worry, Howl only picks up beautiful women." And even after Howl's breakdown over his appearance, she mentions, "I'm not beautiful, but I can live with that." This illustrates Plato's ladder of love, which leads from physical beauty to spiritual goodness. In keeping up with what makes anime special, Miyazaki expresses this visually through character design. Transformation is primarily visualized through hair. External change is a symbol of inner development. Sophie's curse ends, but her white hair remains as an expression of her changed confidence. Howl's fears are also determined by his character design. On the one hand, the change in his hair color is a big step for Howl's obsession with superficial beauty. As with Sophie, Howl's transformation does not come about through magic but through his inner maturation. Howl's inner struggle in particular is directly linked to his fear of war. As soon as he is forced to take part in the fighting, he takes on this monstrous bird-like figure. You can see this as an image of the dehumanization of the individual through military coercion. Miyazaki literally shows here how war dehumanizes its participants. It becomes clear once again how the changing form of a character interacts with the circumstances of the story. Here, Howl and Sophie seen together on the flower field is a very crucial moment. This moment marks a decisive turning point in the development of both protagonists. The love between them proves to be not only a physical attraction to each other, but also a correlative force for exploring their own strengths and personal maturing in these strengths. This, in turn, influences the entire course of the plot. This brings us back to the Symposium, because here, once again, goodness not only manifests itself through this personal maturing of the protagonist, but the community built through this transformation. Like Phaedrus said, the shame a lover feels in front of their beloved affects also everyone around them. This idea is so present in Howl's Moving Castle that Howl and Sophie's transformation affects the story so far so that the war ends, but also any other side character also changes. The moving castle turns into a flying castle. The long-lost prince turns out to be the scarecrow who accompanied them, and even the Witch of the Waste, who is introduced as the antagonist of the story, turns into her original form after losing her magic and becomes part of their community. The goodness of the Witch of the Waste can also be seen in her stance against war. When Marker reports about the news in the newspaper that the war allegedly has ended, she says, "Only fools believe such a thing." So her character in particular makes it clear that evil doesn't exist within one character, but in the structural evil of war. This once again brings us back to the definition of Eros as the intermediator. In this sense, Howl and Sophie's love for one another is this inspiring force, this transforming force that leads to the common good of everyone. Their love acts as this transcendental force that overcomes all weaknesses. Howl becomes courageous and Sophie becomes confident. Their mutual encouragement is also reflected in the symbolism of the house. Sophie brings order to chaos, which Howl later on takes and expands. In following Sophie's example, he changes the whole interior design of the castle and creates another entrance at the magical gate for a flower field, which is also intended to serve as a source of income for Sophie through a flower shop. This new interior design also contrasts sharply with the excessive backgrounds used at the beginning of the movie, where Howl's obsession with external beauty was reflected in previous images. Accordingly, we saw how Howl's room was extravagantly decorated and reflected his inner values at that time. Here too, the contrast between Sophie's simplicity and Howl's extravagance is taken up. However, the correspondence between the pompous decoration of Howl's character design is not an indicator of Howl's superiority. Rather, it's a representation of his unhealthy dependence on beauty. The extreme abundance of jewelry is not only visible in his room but also in a cave in the dream sequence, which suggests that Howl's problem reads deep into his subconscious. In this sequence, Sophie finds Howl in his bird form, frightened. Howl expresses that he can no longer be saved and flees. This dream sequence illustrates the extent of Howl's inner fears. In this context, both the orderliness and simplicity of the transformed interior design show Sophie's influence on Howl's world. This visual symbolism is supported by the dialogue. Finally, after overcoming his fear, Howl says that he no longer wants to flee from the war and emphasizes Sophie's influence on his change. At first glance, this might seem to correspond to the traditional image of masculinity, but once again, Miyazaki subverts this by having Howl first gather his courage through Sophie, but ultimately leading Sophie to his rescue. And also, this statement indicates that his love for Sophie is not seductive, but inspiring and healing. This form of love goes beyond the romantic. It's Platonic in the true sense, a movement towards the good. Let's take another look on the flower field scene when Howl says to Sophie, "You are beautiful." This statement has power because Sophie's appearance changes depending on her self-esteem. The more confident she becomes, the younger she appears. This reaches its peak after Howl shows her the new furnishing and leads her through the flower field. During these minutes, she gradually transforms into her younger self. However, as soon as self-doubt takes hold of her, she abruptly ages again. In this context, the curse is once again only an illusion. Sophie's transformation is not the result of magical intervention. She breaks the curse through her own drive. Another crucial moment that portrays how Holt's change for the better is evident in his love for Sophie is Sophie's time travel. Here she meets Howl as a child and asks him to find her, prompts him to search for her. So, in the end, it's revealed that Howl was looking for Sophie from the beginning on. Ultimately, this heavy impact of Sophie is also shown visually. She shapes Howl's soul by literally reaching into his chest and putting his heart back into its original place. This development reflects Plato's understanding of love, in which the relationship between lover and beloved is a path to knowledge beyond physical desires. Through their relationship, Howl and Sophie help each other to break free from superficial ideas and enter into a deeper spiritual connection. This relationship does not only serve romantic fusion but individual transformation. Both characters grow beyond their limits through their mutual affection for one another. In the end, Miyazaki is more than true to his own claim. He shows love beyond physical attraction. Howl and Sophie obviously have physical attraction for one another, but this physical attraction, in the Platonic sense, is not a hindrance to achieve the inspirational form of love. And this is where Miyazaki distinguishes himself from the conventional movies. He heavily relies on these techniques of classical cinema, yet he goes beyond them. He only uses them to turn them later around. And this is what makes Miyazaki Platonic. It's not the mere friendship between Howl and Sophie, but it's the ultimate good achieved through the inspiration between Howl and Sophie. It's not only a inspiring friendship between two people, but a relationship that goes beyond friendship or romance, that's so inspiring it affects a whole community and moves everyone towards the good. Now the question is how the other creative head of Ghibli, Isao Takahata, works with the concept of love. Here I analyzed the tale of the Princess Kaguya just because it's one of my favorite movies, but also it has a very different approach on love, but still somehow remains platonic. So let's move on to the next example. Isao Takahata's The Tale of the Princess Kaguya from the year 2013 is based on the 10th century Japanese folktale The Tale of the Bamboo Cutter and tells the story of a bamboo cutter who discovers a tiny human being in a bamboo shoot while working. He takes this child and is rewarded with a large amount of gold from the shoot. As a childless couple, he and his wife care for the baby, grows into a young girl at an unusually fast rate. The bamboo cutter, who sees his adopted daughter as a princess, moves to the city despite Kaguya's attachment to the village and its children. From then on, Kaguya is forced to fulfill her father's expectations and comply with the rules of the noble class. At first, she maintains her energetic attitude and resists the rules. However, she cannot escape the visits of noblemen who are only interested in her notorious beauty. Her complete breakdown occurs when the emperor visits. He is so driven by his desire that he pressures Kaguya against her will. In her pain, she longs to escape. With her desire, she unknowingly contacts her place of origin, the moon, and the celestial beings, including Buddha, come to take Kaguya back. Although she now regrets her impulsive wish, as she loves her parents and the world, she cannot resist the will of heaven. On her journey, she finally loses all connection to the earthly world. While Hayao Miyazaki used very conventional ways of filmmaking and storytelling to critique them later on, Takahata does this from the start. He deconstructs every expectation and norm on every level. When it comes to Kaguya's love story, there is especially one very interesting character. Her childhood friend Tsutemaru, who remains only as a potential. This is a very intentional choice made by Takahata and showcased through two encounters of these two after their separation. Their first encounter happens within their social realities, where Kaguya has the role as a princess and Tsutemaru is stealing something because of hunger. This moment just shows the impossibility of their romance. And their second encounter is the portrayal of their wishful thinking, only a fleeting moment in both of their lives, escaping their realities. We are going to talk about this second encounter later on. Anyways, their relationship only remains as a possibility, as a potential for a romantic plotline, but never develops as such, so we can't even count this as an unfulfilled romantic story. Kaguya's tragedy is not the failure of her love story. Takahata avoids going this classical way of storytelling and doesn't utilize romance in a way that creates this myth not aligning with reality. The Tale of the Princess Kaguya rather wants to show us how a woman, self-determined and strong-willed by nature, can still be broken down by social expectations and irrational orders. So, to come back to Tsutemaru, he is obviously shown as a potential lover through his tenderness, through his closeness to Kaguya, but Takahata just doesn't give into the expectation of the audience. So there is an obvious absence of a romantic plotline. Here one might ask, if there is no romance, if there is no lover, where is the platonic love? Here we are at the point where we put down the pin from Eric Simakos. Do you remember him from the Symposium, who said that love is the harmony created through the balance between the contrasts in the universe? It's in everything. And this movie pretty much follows this understanding of love. One example of this is the visual design of Kaguya's days in the village, which are characterized by elements of nature. Visually, Kaguya and her friends are constantly framed by life of the nature setting. Also, detailed shots of plants and animals appear repeatedly here and there. Just as these natural motifs are highlighted individually, there are also numerous shots in which Kaguya herself is surrounded by animals and plants. So, nature plays a central role in the visual language and takes on a character of its own. Kaguya's happiest moments always occur when she interacts with nature in the pictorial space. In addition to these images from her life in the village, this significance is also evident in the fleeting moments that bring her joy despite the restrictions she must endure. However, the fleeting moments do not reflect the same harmony as the images from her childhood. For example, a transcendent dance scene among the cherry blossoms of a large tree is interrupted by a collision with a small child. The guilty reaction of the child's mother reminds Kaguya instantly of her status as a princess. This can also be seen in the garden of her house when she has brief moments of joy interacting with the insect world among the grass. But somehow this scene doesn't reflect the same harmony as in the village. Kaguya once again is surrounded by plants, but not in her free form. With her tied hair, her appearance contrasts her form from the beginning. These visual details reinforce the idea that Kaguya's love is a expressed in harmony with her natural surroundings, and also underscore the nature of love as described by Eric Simakos as balance and achieved through the reconciliation of opposites. This approach to love is especially emphasized by Kaguya when she is forced to leave Earth. When one of the celestial beings asks her to come with them to a pure place without sorrow, Kaguya replies, "They are not flaws. Joy and sorrow are felt by all living things in all shades. Birds, insects, animals, grass, trees, flowers. Mercy." Here she quotes a Warabe Ota, a folk song she sang repeatedly throughout the whole movie as a leitmotif. And the first time she sings this song is with her childhood friend, which starts harmoniously in this upbeat sound. But suddenly, her voice becomes higher, distinguishing itself from everyone around her. She gets into this trance state and starts looking into the landscape. When her friends ask her if something's wrong because she acts weird, she simply replies with, "I don't know." And in another scene, right before her departure, we see how she once again sings this with her mother this time. The same principle applies here too. First, they sing together, but suddenly her voice gets higher and her mother is silenced. In the first scene, it was her looking on nature, on the hills, on the trees, on the sky of nature, longing for the harmony of the world, and here it's a montage put on Kaguya's singing voice. Kaguya's connection to the harmony of the world is shown through this montage. Thus, this montage includes random things like the sea, a man running with the child, birds, anything that counts in Kaguya's world as part of the balance and harmony. The second scene is also very important when it comes to Kaguya's connection to the world because she reveals to her mother her secret. How she came to this earth. She starts recalling when she was on the moon. There was this woman who once were on Earth, but were stolen of all her memories. Yet she still looked so longingly on the planet that Kaguya got so curious on what it is about this world that makes it so special. This forbidden curiosity of Kaguya was what brought her onto Earth. It was not a blessing, but a punishment. So her tragic ending is obviously the punishment of the heavenly world. In a minute, you see why this is important. The visual narrative as well as the leitmotif in particular show how Kaguya doesn't want this heavenly world. She just wants to experience the balance and harmony of our world in its entirety with the sorrow as well as the happiness and joy. This is what love means for Kaguya. This is what would have brought her fulfillment. So her tragedy doesn't lie in the impossibility of her romantic plotline, but in the harmony she desires so deeply but can't achieve at any point. Even when she tries to sing harmoniously with loved ones, with her friends or family members, she can't even achieve this harmonious tone. To open the definition of love according to this movie a bit more, let's ask the question: if bodily desire doesn't exist within this concept of love, does it equal the medieval understanding of Platonic love, where it's only a spiritual and intellectual form of love? Because as we can see through her suitors, bodily desire is also very much disregarded in this movie. What starts as a satire with Kaguya's challenge to these noble men, where at first they are turned into laughingstocks, takes a very dark turn. Some of these men leave their families, some of them even die on their journeys. This obviously breaks her. But the complete escalation of things and her complete breakdown happen when the very representation of the social order she lives in, the emperor, comes into play. This is the moment where Kaguya can't resist anymore. Without her consent, he harasses her physically, leading to her complete inner breakdown. So there's this obvious disregard of bodily attraction. But this doesn't mean that Takahata is completely against it in the sense of the medieval understanding of Platonic love or the church overall, because here once again Sutamaru comes into play. Their last fleeting moment is mainly a very compassionate and longing hug for one another. They hold hands when they are flying over fields. So Kaguya obviously doesn't disregard bodily desire because of asceticism. It's the fear of being possessed. Because like we see in Sutamaru, if it happens between two mutuals, it's a binding and beautiful thing. But this physicality within the dynamic of her and these noble men creates obviously an imbalance, which is heavily inflicted in Kaguya's understanding of love. Another aspect that makes this movie not such a well fit for the medieval understanding of Platonic love is Kaguya's departure. Because according to the thinkers of the Middle Ages, especially the ladder of love stands for the ascent to God. Anything worldly must be transcended to achieve godly love, heavenly love. And here in the tale of the Princess Kaguya, we have this literal image of Kaguya's ascendance from Earth to this heavenly sphere on the moon. Yet this once again is not what Kaguya was looking for. Like the social order of our world, the celestial beings with Buddha on top of them as the representative of that order is as much despised by Kaguya as the order here. There's this image of ascendance as part of the tragic ending of Kaguya. So Kaguya's image of ascendance to this heavenly sphere is part of her tragedy. This is not a liberating moment for her. Kaguya turns to a place she already once tried to escape. Again and again, we see how Kaguya constantly turns towards the earth, turning her back to Buddha, and even having the literal distance to earth, she one last time looks back longingly for the love as she knows it. Thus, the tale of the Princess Kaguya becomes a meditation on the condition of love in a world that's structured disharmoniously. Here, love doesn't mean overcoming imperfections, but rather accepting them as they are and still feeling affection, compassion, and responsibility. Takahata's work is not only a deconstruction of classical romantic narratives, but also a philosophical and ethical examination of love that goes beyond gender desire and social utility. The balance that Kaguya strives for is not a perfect order, but an ever-threatened equilibrium between inner truth and social constraints. In the end, Takahata's understanding of Platonic love is not anchored in this transcendent and divine sphere, but in concrete interpersonal experiences such as closeness to other living beings, longing for justice, or the resistance to injustice systems. Kaguya's love does not follow the classical redemption arc where everything is redeemed through the love story. Rather, she actively rejects this romanticized perfection and acts as an ethical force that reveals this harmonious order and exposes social injustice that destabilizes this order. So in the end, even so, Takahata doesn't follow the ladder of love step by step as Miyazaki did, he still has this underlying understanding of Platonic love. Miyazaki and Takahata, one optimist and a pessimist, showcase through their craft how female characters are surrounded by social expectations. In Howl's moving castle, we see it in the conventional means Miyazaki starts his movie with and slowly turns around them to set his positive note on the shift created by the power of love. Love is here in its full sense Platonic and creates a permanent ending that is built upon a good world for all of its inhabitants. It might not be 100% realistic, however, it fully serves the depiction of a love story a la Plato. Takahata, on the contrary, ends his movie with a heavenly ascendance, yet shows how this ascendance is no more or less than the limitation set for Kaguya on Earth, because Kaguya finds good and beauty in the balance of things, and neither the humans with their oppressive social constructs nor the celestial beings with their imbalanced supposedly good world fulfill Kaguya's longings. In the end, through the imbalance of good and bad in both of her worlds, there is nothing left for her but a tragic ending. Either way, both masters of Studio Ghibli are doing more than justice to the claim to show love beyond romance. They understand love in its entirety with its earthly bodily side as well as its intellectual and spiritual benefits. In this way, both of them make love a vital point in their storytelling to convey the human experience in different contexts. And this is what makes both of them great representatives of Platonic love in their own way.